Hello and welcome to the Justice Factor. We are now 5 weeks away from South Africa's 5th national elections since 1994. Who will win and who will lose? Today we look at the likely winners and losers of these elections, but ask the question, what happens in 2030? Who will be in charge then and why? My guest today is Dr. Yaki Silias, Executive Director of the Institute for Security Studies, who has written a paper looking at these issues. The document will be released next week. After that discussion, we'll give you our winner and loser of the week. But first, we'll look at the top stories of the week. My guests are Phillip, Associate Editor of the Mail and Guardian newspaper, and Mondli Makhanya, Editor-at-Large of the City Press newspaper. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Let me start with you. Gwedemantashe of the ANC says the media is obsessed with the Nkandla issue. Are you obsessed? Are you both obsessed?
Absolutely, we're obsessed, but so is the rest of South Africa.
Why this obsession?
Well, I think the Secretary General may have missed that this is what South Africa is talking about right now, and South Africa hasn't stopped talking about this since the Public Protector released her report. You know, we in the media are doing a lot of work around it, of course. We believe it to be an interesting story, but I dare you to stop a South African on an urban street now and not get involved in an Nkandla story. If the ANC is not obsessed about it, then they're the only ones in the country.
Mondli Makhanya, do you agree? Are you going to let go of this story at the City Press?
No, absolutely not. I mean, like, you have 250 million rands of taxpayers' money that has been spent on one house. And it's not an issue that the ANC has been trying to project this issue as some kind of media hype, as some kind of like middle class issue. But as Phillip says, I mean, like, everybody from your grassroots person right up to everybody, I mean, in the boardrooms, everybody is talking about Nkandla because it's simply unbelievable that so much money has been spent on one man's house and nobody at any point saw it fit to stop it. And I think, you know, I know people always make comparisons, say this is bigger than the arms deal, and so the arms deal has become a kind of like a standard in terms of people describing corruption and maladministration. But I would say since 1994, Nkandla is as big as the arms deal scandal, if not actually bigger, because it cuts right to the core of our...
Sometimes I feel like, you know, the two of you, people like me in the media, are deluded about this. 86 members of the ANC's highest decision-making body between Congresses, the NEC, sat this weekend, and they came out and said, no, the ANC issued a one paragraph on Nkandla and a lot of other stuff. So I'm wondering if actually it's the two of you who are deluded about this. The powers that be, the ANC, NEC, doesn't think that this is an issue at all.
I think for 4 years, most of us thought that we were going crazy because we could see what was happening at Nkandla, and everyone went, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. Black is white and, you know, water isn't wet. That's what we heard for 4 years. Finally, Thuli Madonsela came out with a report and actually told us what had happened, and it sounded eerily familiar because you'd been reading about it in the papers of our newspapers for so long. Now the NEC is saying, well, we believe in accountability and it's very important to uphold the dignity of institutions set up by the Constitution. When then asked today, we asked Gwedemantashe, so how about the President not answering the questions from the Public Protector, not providing the information that she asked for? He first said, I don't know, that's an allegation. We then pointed out what the questions were to him. Then he said, I don't know whether it was an issue of not answering the questions or whether he was simply talking to the issue. And then he went off telling us how the media had not read the relevant legislation and just didn't understand what was going on here. He seemed to be grasping a bit there.
Mondli Makhanya, let's get to the heart of it. What impact will this continued Nkandla saga have on the ANC electorally on May 7th?
Well, I think the ANC is very concerned about that. It has been concerned for some time. If you remember, since towards the end of last year, the ANC has been saying, we are worried about the timing of the release of this report. It must not be released close to the election. So clearly, they have been picking up on the ground that there is a lot of anger coming from people. There's a lot of concern coming from members on the ground, from ANC members as well as ordinary supporters. But I think the damage that the issue was going to do to the ANC's electoral base has been done already throughout the 4 years that this saga has been running, because it has been top of mind, it has been on people's lips. And the figures, remember, have been growing from the initial 67 million when the story first broke to, and it was in the hundreds, now it's in the 200s. So people have been the story has been growing. So a lot of that damage has been done. I don't think that the release of the report now, kind of like 2 weeks ago, will shift things that much. I think it will have a marginal effect, I think, on some undecideds. And I think that's probably what the ANC is concerned about, that there may be a percentage or two of people who may make up their minds based on the current scandal that's
Phillip, it's just weeks to go to the election. Clearly, the ANC can recall its president and say, no, this is not a election candidate. What happens after the election? Do you think there will be enough pressure? There will be sufficient pressure in the ANC to say, perhaps President Zuma needs to take some time off and deal with his legal problems?
Take time off for personal matters. Look, if I were an up-and-coming leader in the ANC, if I were looking in the next 20 years or so at a top leadership position in government, I would be worried, because it doesn't affect the ANC that much come this election. Jacob Zuma will survive, the ANC will survive, but the entire organization is being tainted by this. You now have the entire ANC tying itself into knots, trying to protect Jacob Zuma. Over time, that does no one else within that organization any good. Surely they must be making those calculations and thinking about 2016 and a possible regime change.
Mondli Makhanya, someone like Ronnie Kasrils, Trevor Manuel, Paulo Jordan, stand up and say Jacob Zuma has to take moral responsibility for this, even if he didn't know about what was going on. What's going to happen to people like these in the ANC, the Ben Chiroks of this world?
Well, these are people who have nothing to lose. They are the elders. And so they've run their careers. So they can afford to stand up and say, thus far and no further. The key thing is the majority of those 86 members of the NEC, the younger people who are supposed to make those decisions, and the people who are actually going to be leading the country going forward. Look, you know, on the outside, it seems as if the NEC is united on this. But actually, if you dug deeper, you'd find that there's a lot of division, there's a lot of discontent around Nkandla for some of the reasons that Phillip is pointing out. People do recognize the damage that is being done to the ANC by this saga. But there are strong men, Zuma strong men within the NEC who determine direction. And you are not going to now simply stand up and be the one who challenges the dominant view in an NEC meeting and be shot down. And remember, in about 6 to 8 weeks' time, there's a cabinet that's going to be appointed. There are plum positions of chairman of portfolio committees and so on and so on. So people will look after themselves at this particular period. I think if there are going to be any cracks, there's going to be any action, it will be, those murmurs will begin to get stronger after the election, and I think that it will not take long after the elections.
Phillip, when I look at this thing, I sit there and say, wow, this is a gift for a Julius Malema, a Helen Zille, a Bantu Holomisa. I mean, the opposition are they taking advantage of the ANC's troubles, of the Nkandla issue?
They appear to be trying to, and they're really messing it up. All they really have to do is to shut up and sit back. The ANC is doing a perfectly fine job of tearing itself apart on this. They're doing a perfectly fine job of showing voters just what they're made of. Every time the DA, or God help us, Julius Malema gets involved, they actually cloud the issue. And I think the ANC can't wait for them to chime in on it so the spotlight isn't on the ANC.
Is the opposition taking advantage of it, Mondli Makhanya?
I think yes. I think but you can only make so much noise about it in order for it to shift public opinion, in order for it to shift votes. And I think that the DA certainly has done so. Julius Malema, the amount of noise he can make can only be so loud, and before people actually shut their ears. So unfortunately, it's the quality of the people who are making that noise and their ability to strategize around it that's a bit wanting.
Yeah. Mondli Makhanya, Phillip, thanks so much for your time. After the break, we ask Institute for Security Studies head, Dr. Yakis Elias, if the ANC will get a 2/3 majority in the upcoming elections. Stay with us.
News that moves. eNCA.com.